Hello, I'm Janine Turner, founder of Constituting America. I and Kathy Gillespie, Constituting America's CEO, welcome you to our 13th annual 90-day study. It's a 90-day study entitled 90 plus 90 equals 180. History holds the key to the future. We thank you for joining our 13th annual study, and we want to thank Amanda Hughes for orchestrating these wonderful studies. This year's study is about the first principles of the American founding. Today's essay is the principle of civic duty, civic engagement. Guest essayist, Joseph M. Knippenberg. It is tempting to regard the American founding and the constitutional order brought into being as relying almost exclusively on self-interest, or at best, quote, enlightened self-interest, end quote. We take for granted that, as James Madison observes in Federalist 51, human beings aren't angels, and that our political order is so constructed through institutional checks and balances as to make ambition counteract ambition. We also find it easy to agree with Madison's argument in Federalist 10 that we are animated by the pursuit of our interest, which most frequently and reliably, but not exclusively, are defined in, quote, selfish, end quote, economic terms. Quote, those who hold and those who are without property have ever formed distinct interests in society. Those who are creditors and those who are debtors fall under a like discrimination. A landed interest, a manufacturing interest, a mercantile interest, a moneyed interest, with many lesser interests, grow up of necessity in civilized nations and divide them into different classes, actuated by different sentiments and views. End quote. Viewed from this perspective, interest group politics might seem a sordid business, with emphasis on both its sordidness and its commercial character. Economists are comfortable disparaging most political action in terms of, quote, rents seeking, end quote. An example, using political power to redistribute the wealth generated by the market. This is not surprising that one commentator famously devoted an entire book to examining, quote, why Americans hate politics, end quote. But for a variety of reasons, this view is incomplete and short-sighted. To begin with, our founders certainly didn't take the view that politics was venal, sordid, and basically selfish. After all, they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to the task of establishing American independence, not a rational risk for someone out simply to maximize profit or utility. As John Adams wrote in April 26, 1777 to his wife Abigail, quote, posterity, you will never know how much it costs the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it, end quote. For Adams, freedom was not something to be cast away or consumed, but rather to be preserved for oneself and one's posterity. It wasn't understood merely as a condition of one's immediate personal gratification, but as a cherished trust to be handed down from generation to generation. We can look to the founding generation for examples of how to take this trust seriously. First, in the Northwest Ordinance, passed by Congress under the Articles of Confederation, and then repassed by Congress under the Constitution, we read these words, quote, religion, morality, and knowledge, being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged, end quote. Schools don't just train workers or create clever consumers. They are to engage in civic education, uniting morality, which, as George Washington reminds us, is supported by religion, with knowledge for the sake of good government. Second, in Federalist number 10, immediately after describing the different interests that grow up in, quote, civilized nations, end quote, Madison says that the, quote, regulation of these various and interfering interests forms the principal task of modern legislation, end quote. This, quote, regulation, end quote, should not consist in the dominance of one interest, majority or minority over others, but should seek to attain, quote, the permanent and aggregate interest of the community, end quote. While to be sure, quote, enlightened statesmen may not always be at the helm, end quote, managing this conflict for the common good, those who represent the people should be acquainted with the diverse array of concerns and interests among their constituents. This can only happen if these representatives have the disposition to listen and the capacity to understand. And if the people can engage in respectful conversation with one another and with their representatives. And then, to be effective, these representatives must be able to engage productively with their counterparts across the country. It is entirely in line with these expectations that men like Benjamin Franklin, Benjamin Rush, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and George Washington cared deeply about the education of future generations. Our political leaders should not merely be wealthy and well-born, as the anti-federalists feared, but rather selected for their excellence and held accountable by a vigilant and well-informed electorate. Finally, some of the founders presciently anticipated an argument made in great detail by Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America. Thomas Jefferson frequently promoted a plan of dividing Virginia into wards, modeled on the New England townships Tocqueville later celebrated. Each was to be responsible for local education and self-government. These, quote, little republics, end quote, as he put it in a letter to John Tyler, May 26, 1810, quote, would be the main strength of the great one, end quote. While Jefferson's plan was not formally instituted, Tocqueville found that its spirit permeated the young nation he visited. Quote, Americans of all ages, all conditions, all minds constantly unite. Not only do they have commercial and industrial associations in which all take part, but they also have 1,000 other kinds, religious, moral, grave, futile, very general and very particular, immense and very small. Everywhere that, at the head of a new undertaking, you see the government in France and a great lord in England, count on it that you will perceive an association in the United States. Arguments and examples could be multiplied from Tocqueville's great book, some pertaining to participation in local politics, others to the creation of a variety of associations I just mentioned. But Tocqueville's main point echoes that made by those long-time rivals and friends, Adams and Jefferson. Engaging with one another is the Republican and Democratic substitute for and prophylactic against both aristocratic and governmental paternalism. Joseph M. Knippenberg is professor of politics at Oglethorpe University in Brookhaven, Georgia, where he has taught since 1985. Thank you for joining us for today's study. Please spread the word to all your friends, family, social media. It's really very important, I believe, to understand the founding principles of America. And I would encourage you to check out last year's study about American exceptionalism, redefined or defined. American exceptionalism, defined, exposed, explained. So that when anyone ever says to you America is not exceptional, and if you believe America is exceptional, which I do, you will have 90 days, 90 essays worth of tools in your toolbox to explain why America is exceptional. Please check it out too. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.